Hi there. I'm Valerie Payne, President and CEO of the Halifax Chamber of Commerce. We've been hearing a lot of rhetoric lately around the Maritime Link. Today, we're going to try and separate fact from fiction with my guest, Murray Coolican. Murray is Deputy Minister of the Department of Energy. Come along. Murray, thanks very much for meeting with us today. The purpose of today's discussion is to chat a little bit about the Maritime Link and bring some clarity around a very complex issue, a very complex and important mega project for our community.
Well, there are two things that are driving this decision. One is the cost of fossil fuels continues to go up. The price of coal has risen dramatically in the last number of years. We've had a huge dependency on coal. It's not sustainable from an economic point of view. The second reason is environmental, that coal has emissions. It has, in particular, greenhouse gas emissions. And the federal government has now put in place regulations that require us to reduce our GHGs from coal, to reduce the amount of coal that we're burning. And so we've got to move now to take advantage of this opportunity so that we can meet those greenhouse gas emission obligations in the least expensive way possible.
Mm-hmm. Tell me about the ownership structure of the Maritime Link. Emera is a publicly traded company, the private sector, if you will, and there's been a lot of discussion around Emera putting in $1.5 billion into this project, but at the end having no ownership. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, the important part of this deal is that Emera is buying 20% of the energy for 20% of the capital cost. So in any consideration of this, you have to think about the energy as well as the transmission. So we're really buying energy and a new link between Newfoundland and Nova Scotia. At the end of the 35 years, the ownership of the link goes back to Newfoundland, but we will still have the link there. We'll be able to take advantage of it. Newfoundland will be able to deliver power to us over that link. But again, the deal is 20% of the capital cost of the project in return for 20% of the energy from the project.
Why wouldn't we partnership for ownership in the Maritime Link?
Emera was interested in a long-term fixed price for a block of clean energy, and this deal delivers that. The long-term ownership of the link is not an advantage for Nova Scotia. We will be able to purchase energy from Newfoundland without any transmission costs after this deal is completed. Newfoundland will be paying for the link and its operating and maintenance costs. We won't be paying for those costs. So we'll have access to the energy without the costs of owning the link.
Okay. Tell us a little bit about the role of the Department of Energy. What do they have to do with all of this?
First of all, to set energy policy for the province, and the policies we've set in the last number of years have actually helped us to deal with the greenhouse gas emission targets that the federal government has set in a way that is less expensive for Nova Scotians. We've also done an analysis of this project by an independent consultant who's done work for this government, done work for previous governments in Nova Scotia, done work in New Brunswick, throughout the region in New England, has been involved in some issues in Quebec, very expert. And what he's done is to compare the cost of the Maritime Link project to bringing electricity from Quebec or from getting electricity from building natural gas generation in combination with wind. And his conclusion is that the Maritime Link is cheaper than both alternatives, $400 million less expensive than energy from Quebec Hydro, and $1.5 billion less expensive than a local natural gas and wind solution.
Having a bit of a hard time understanding the numbers, Emera is projecting that Nova Scotian households on average will be paying $1.50 a month or slightly less than $20 a year towards this project over the next 5 years and be stable or decline after that. If you do the math on that with about 440,000 households in Nova Scotia, that comes up to be around $9 million. What about the other $75 million for that project?
When you're doing the math on these projects, it's never simple. It's always complex. Those numbers will be reviewed by the Utility and Review Board at the hearing, and people will have an opportunity to test the assumptions and all that sort of thing. But there are a lot of puts and takes to this. So, what about the reduction in cost because coal is no longer being purchased to generate that power? What about the contributions of other customers, not just the residential customers? So what about the benefits of the market energy that will be available to be purchased at a lower price than the fixed price energy that we're contracted to buy? So there are a lot of different pieces to the equation, and I have the complete confidence that the UARB will be able to test all those numbers, and other interveners will be able to ask questions and test the numbers as well.
Let's talk about demand. Detractors say that we won't need the energy in the future, particularly given our ambitious targets for renewable energies, that in fact we will be left in a position with excess power.
Based on the power that we're contracted to buy, we don't think that's going to happen, because to reach the greenhouse gas targets, we're going to have to reduce the amount of coal we're burning. It will probably lead to coal plants being shut down completely. So when you're replacing a coal plant, which is a firm source of energy, you need a firm source of energy to replace that. So the calculations that we've done on demand have looked at demand after there have been some reductions in demand in the province because of Bowater closing, for example, and one of the mills at Port Hawkesbury closing. That's been taken into account. And then we stress tested. So what happens if the load is significantly below that? What if the load is significantly above that? And yes, we're still focused on efficiency and trying to reduce our demand, but look around your house and tell me if you don't have significant more electricity use in your house, given the number of TVs that you have, computers that are operating, internet, that sort of thing. And people are using those kinds of devices a lot more today.
We understand the United States has a goal to become energy independent. What will that mean to us in the future with the Maritime Link?
Well, we think actually that there is going to be continuing demand for clean energy in the United States, particularly in the New England market. And there are different markets. And when people talk about energy independence for the United States, they're usually talking about supplies of natural gas and oil. But I can't see the United States no longer taking imports of electricity from Quebec or from British Columbia or from Atlantic Canada when that's available.
Mm-hmm. So Murray, what happens if this doesn't happen? What if it doesn't proceed?
I think if this project doesn't proceed, we're going to be in a difficult place. We're going to have to go back to the drawing board and see what other options are out there. Certainly from our assessment, we'll be in for higher costs than we would be with this project. The other significant advantage that we would lose if this project doesn't go ahead is what I refer to as an energy loop. That at the moment we're at the end of the line in North America, and by connecting Nova Scotia to Newfoundland, Newfoundland to Labrador, Labrador to Quebec, Quebec to New England, to New Brunswick to Nova Scotia, that puts us in an energy loop. And anybody who lives in the city knows the advantages of being in an energy loop. Mm-hmm. So often when the power goes out, it'll come back on in a second. You have to change the clocks. If you're on an electric distribution line, at the end of the line in a rural setting, when the power goes off between you and the source of energy, it's out. There's no loop to help mm-hmm. you. So that loop will give us greater reliability. That loop also means we'll be in the middle of a competitive market between the potential of buying electricity from New Brunswick and Quebec and New England on the one hand, and from Newfoundland on the other.
What are the risks for this project? What keeps you up at night?
Obviously, anytime you're in a construction project, there are risks with the technology, there are risks with the construction. Because of the nature of the deal, we're only exposed to 20% of the cost overrun risk. So Newfoundland is exposed to 80%. So that limits our risk right there. I think also the company is being very careful to use technology that's been proven in other places. There have been subsea cables of this nature laid in different parts of Europe that are longer and in more difficult situations than we have here. So there are risks, but they've been limited quite well, both by the agreement that Emera has negotiated, but also because of the technology they're using and frankly the skills of the crew that's pursuing the project.
And what role can the Chamber of Commerce play? What can its members do, both in perhaps in supporting the project or in taking advantage of the opportunities in the future?
Well, I think it's really important that the business community understands the energy picture and what's driving the energy decisions that we're taking. The more they understand, the more that they can influence the direction it's going. And I think business people want to know that the electricity is going to be there. I think they're looking for stability in their pricing, and I think the policies we've set out will create more stability. So we're less dependent on fossil fuels, where there isn't stability in price, and more dependent on some of the renewable sources, where once you've made the investment, there's a considerable amount of stability. I think the other thing that's important for the business community is to understand efficiency and how you can save money. I've, through my travels in the province in the last couple of weeks, I'm amazed at the number of businesses that I've run into where they've invested in some energy efficiency with the help of Efficiency Nova Scotia, and they're paying significantly less for their energy today than they were 3 or 4 years ago, in spite of some of the increases we've seen both in the cost of electricity and the cost of diesel as examples.
Murray, thanks very much for meeting with us today.